Welcome to the ICS Network, the place to learn advanced techniques for developing with Motif. The ICS Network is brought to you by Integrated Computer Solutions, the experts in Motif tools and development. ICS provides advanced visual development tools and services for software professionals. ICS offers BX Pro and UIMX, the two leading GUI builders for Linux and Unix. They help you create world-class Motif user interfaces quickly and easily. In addition, ICS provides professional services and expert support for all of your Motif development needs. If you have a group of developers that need to be trained in Motif, be sure to call us. ICS is the sponsor of the Motif Zone, the home of Open Motif. The Motif Zone houses pre-built binaries, comprehensive documentation, developer forums, and the complete source tree for Open Motif. Visit www.motifzone.org for all this and access to the latest version. Today's topic is part 1 of Insider Tips on Motif. We'll take a look at the X Windows system, including its architecture, XLib and XT, widgets, and some Motif tips and techniques. Our speaker today is Jeff LeBlanc, an ICS Motif expert. Jeff has developed commercial applications and custom widgets in Motif and has been a Motif trainer for over a decade.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ICS Network presentation of Insider Tips on Motif. I am your host for this presentation, Jeff LeBlanc, and today we are sponsored by Integrated Computer Solutions. ICS is a company that was founded back in 1987 and happens to be headquartered right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. ICS maintains a worldwide presence, doing business not only in the United States, but in Europe and along the Pacific Rim as well. And ICS's core business is everything in the area of designing and implementing user interface solutions. ICS provides tools for the developer in the form of Builder Accessory and BX Pro. ICS provides supporting libraries such as EPAC and ViewKit, support for Motif, and training on user interface toolkits such as Motif and Qt, and on Builder Accessory itself. ICS is also available to help you on your project implementation needs if that's something that you require. ICS is totally committed to Motif developers and is in fact the sponsor of the Motif Zone, which is the website where Motif and Open Motif are readily available. The Motif Zone has over 6,000 registered users and to date has had over 9,000 downloads of Open Motif. For today's presentation, we're going to talk about starting with the X Windows system. We'll discuss the architecture of X, we'll discuss the X Window Toolkit and how to create widgets using the X Toolkit, getting specifically to Motif itself. From there, we'll go in and present some tips and tricks for using Motif. And we'll close the first part of this presentation with a discussion of some additional Motif information that Motif developers might find particularly useful. So we'll start with a discussion of the X Windows system, which was developed years ago as one of the very first networked windowing systems that were available. X is actually a successor to a system called W, which came out of Stanford, which is where the name X came from. And it's essentially a protocol for communicating window information, user input, and graphical operations from a user or to a user across a network. And the X protocol, when it was first designed, was really years ahead of its time. It's only been in recent years that other protocols have come around that have the level of flexibility that X has. X is still being currently heavily used and developed, and in fact, the latest revision of X is X11 R7.4, as discussed at x.org. The design goals of X Windows were to be platform independent. So specifically from the design, it was not set up to be tied to any specific operating system. It was designed to be device independent, so it can work with any number of not only input but output devices as well. And most importantly, it was designed to be network transparent, to deliver applications across the network or onto a local machine without having to make any application change. And really, it is still the only windowing system that is available today that supports, out of the box, this level of network transparency. The X Windows system runs in a client-server model, where you specifically have some machine that's running possibly as a really fast server, and you'll find out that's where the X application or the X clients are going to sit. Meanwhile, on your desktop, you will find the X server itself is running. And this is something that is actually, to some degree, a reversal of what you normally think of as a client-server relationship. Normally, the fast things run on a fast server somewhere and you have clients on your desktop. But in this particular model, the situation is reversed. What happens in X version of the client-server model is that an application runs and it makes requests of the server. These requests go over the network, go into a queue where they're processed, and then the server sends responses back, possibly over the network, possibly on the local machine, back to the application, which then processes them. And this basically continues for the lifetime of the application. Architecturally speaking, any application that is built to run off of X has more or less the following architecture. You're going to have some type of a hardware platform that you're running on, which is going to have some type of an operating system and a network stack on top of it. And that's where XLib, or low-level X Windows, lives. And this is the piece that implements the X protocol. And it's possible for you to write an application that's entirely built using XLib. I have done this in the past, and I can tell you from firsthand experience that it is a non-trivial thing to do. Most people find themselves working above this dash line and working at the level of the X intrinsics or X toolkit, where they're developing some application that's going to be built on some type of a widget set. Specifically, we'll be focusing on the Motif widget set. So to look at these pieces in a little more detail, we'll start with XLib, which is the low-level library that everything is built on top of. XLib is really a one-to-one mapping between C-based functions and the protocol requests that an application makes of the server. As it is C-based, it is really not object-oriented, and it gives no enforcement of any type of look and feel. It doesn't give you any structure for creating what we'll refer to for the moment as interface objects, such as buttons. And it doesn't give you a whole lot of help with event handling. So you're really on your own in terms of what it is you're trying to develop for a user interface. XLib does do a really good job with putting pixels on the screen, setting up colors, and drawing shapes. And sometimes you really do just need to be down at this level when you're developing an application or portions of your application. But most of the time, developers are at a higher level, working with the X toolkit, also known as XT. XT was designed to provide a structured mechanism for building these user interface building blocks or widgets. And it starts to provide levels of abstraction, specifically for things such as event handling, making selections, receiving callbacks. It does a good job of insulating us from some of the more complex data structures that are contained down within the X server, and managing things called widget resources, which we'll talk about in detail a little bit later. A widget is specifically any interface object that, in this context, conforms to the standards set down by the X toolkit. You can think of a widget as a user interface building block. It is a low-level object that has a particular job and knows how to do it very well. So the screenshot we have here from a program called FrameMaker shows a dialog box with a number of widgets in it. We see buttons, we see labels, we see a text area that we can type into, and we have a list that we can select things out of. All of these things are widgets, and they're pieces that a user can interact with, which some developer has taken and assembled together to form a particular user interface. Motif itself is a set of XT-compliant widgets. Like the other layers in the stack, it is also written in C, and it provides a very consistent look and feel, specifically providing the interface with kind of a 3D beveled look and feel. And it's at this level that, for the first time, we actually get this notion of a look and feel being introduced to us as part of our development libraries. Motif has a large number of widgets and an even larger number of convenience functions to help the developer in creating and manipulating pieces of their user interface.